I think we should differentiate three projects which seem to me to be easily conflated and are distinct and independently worthy endeavors. The first project, with respect to morality, is we could understand what people do in the name of, quote, morality. And we could look at the world, we could see all of these diverse behaviors and rules and cultural artifacts and morally salient emotions like empathy and disgust. And we can see how this plays out in human communities in our time and in history, and we could look at all that in as non-judgmental a way as possible and seek to understand it. And seek to understand it in evolutionary terms, and seek to understand it in psychological and neurobiological terms as it arises in the present. And we can call that complete set of data and that whole effort to be a science of morality. And that's a purely descriptive science of the sort that I hear Jonathan advocating and as he's practicing. And that seems to me, for most scientists, to pretty much exhaust all the legitimate points of contact between science and morality, and science and judgments of good and evil and right and wrong. But I think there are two other projects that we could concern ourselves with and are arguably more important than that. And the second project would be to actually get clearer about what we mean and should mean by the term morality and how it relates to human well-being altogether, and actually use that new discipline to think more intelligently about how to maximize human well-being. Now, philosophers may think that that's begging some of the important questions, and I'll get back to that, but I think that's a distinct project. It's not a purely descriptive project. It's a normative project. How can we think about moral truth in the context of science? And a third project is a project of persuasion. How can we persuade all of the people who are committed to silly and harmful things in the name of, quote, morality, to change their commitments, to have different goals, to have different objectives in life, and to lead better lives? And I think that third project is actually the most important project facing humanity at this moment. And I think it actually subsumes everything else we could care about, from stopping climate change to stopping nuclear proliferation to curing cancer to saving the whales. Any big effort that requires that we get our priorities straight and marshal massive commitments of time and resources can fall within this project of all of us converging on the same kinds of economic and political and environmental goals. And it seems to me that obviously that project of persuasion is a very difficult task, but it strikes me as especially difficult if you can't figure out in what sense anyone could ever be right and wrong about questions of morality and questions of value. And so that's the right and wrong part is project 2, and that's what I'm focused on. Now, there have been impediments to focusing on project 2, and the main one being that most right-thinking people, most well-educated people, most well-intentioned people, certainly most scientists and public intellectuals, and I would think most journalists, have been convinced that something in the last 200 years of intellectual progress has made it impossible to actually talk about moral truth. That there is no, and this is not because human experience is so difficult to study or the brain is so complex, but just that there's no intellectual basis from which to say anyone is ever right or wrong about questions of good and evil and human value. So my interest is in trying to undermine that intuition. I think that intuition is born now of it's kind of the received opinion in science and philosophy, and I think it's based on a lot of fallacies and double standards and frankly bad philosophy that has gotten us to this point. And And the first thing I would point out is that we have, one thing I should just point out is that this has consequences. I mean, so for instance, one signature moment where this bias against Project 2 would be expressed was when, in 1947, when the United Nations was trying to formulate its Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the American Anthropological Association stepped forward and said, well, you can't do this. I mean, to do this would be to merely be foisting one provincial notion of human rights on the rest of human culture, and any notion of human rights is the product of culture, and this is just an intellectually illegitimate thing to do. And this is what, this is 1947. This is essentially the best our social sciences could do with the crematory of Auschwitz still smoking. And yet it's been long been obvious that we need some to converge as a global civilization on how to behave and how to treat one another. We need some universal conception of right and wrong. So this, in addition to just not being true, I think the skepticism about moral truth actually has consequences that we really should worry about. So one thing to observe is that definitions matter, and we in science are always in the business of framing conversations, making definitions, and there's nothing about that process that gives us epistemological relativism, that nullifies truth claims. So in physics, we define physics as, loosely speaking, our best effort to understand the behavior of matter and energy in the universe. So it's defined with respect to the goal of understanding how matter is going to behave. Now, anyone else is free to define physics in some other way. I mean, a creationist physicist could come into the room and say, well, that's not my definition of physics. I want my physics, I want to simply match the book of Genesis. And we are free to exclude that person and say, well, you really don't belong at this conference. That's not physics as we are interested in it. You're using the word differently. You're not playing our language game. That gesture of exclusion, in no sense, the fact that the discourse of physics is not sufficient to silence that guy